Isaiah Berlin's journey through the tumultuous 20th century gave him a unique perspective on the challenges humanity faces in seeking a meaningful, just life. Born in 1909 in Riga, Latvia, Berlin's early years were shaped by the political instability of the Russian Empire, his family's Jewish heritage, and the eventual collapse of Tsarist Russia. His family's flight to Estonia following the Bolshevik Revolution provided Berlin with the first lessons in the fragility of liberty and the dangers of unchecked political power. These experiences would form the bedrock of his intellectual contributions to philosophy, where he tirelessly examined the relationship between individual freedoms, political systems, and human diversity. In his lifetime, Berlin became one of the foremost scholars of political thought, drawing heavily from his experiences with totalitarian regimes and the personal conflicts that arose from ideological dogma. What set him apart was not just his ability to dissect complex political ideas but his ability to see them through the eyes of human beings suffering under oppressive regimes. From the rise of fascism in Europe to the Soviet states' totalitarian policies, Berlin's intellectual clarity arose out of his lived experience, watching the world twist and bend under the weight of ideology. Berlin's key lessons focused on the idea that respecting human freedom and the pluralistic nature of society is vital for the survival of democracy. The values of tolerance, empathy, and intellectual flexibility were not just theoretical ideals for Berlin, but practical necessities in an increasingly divided world. The Young Philosopher and the Birth of Value Pluralism. Berlin's academic journey began at the University of Oxford, where he encountered the work of thinkers such as John Stuart Mill, Kant, and Hegel, all of whom would influence his own philosophy. However, it was his early interactions with the works of Russian intellectuals, especially the writings of thinkers like the poet and philosopher Alexander Herzen, that deeply shaped his outlook. It was from this tradition that Berlin began to develop his groundbreaking theory of value pluralism. As a young man, Berlin became aware that the philosophical debates around utopian ideals were not merely abstract but had real consequences for people's lives. The Russian intellectual tradition, steeped in the pain of revolution and the desire for a better life, offered him an insight that many Western thinkers had overlooked: the recognition that different human beings pursue different, sometimes conflicting, values. This became the cornerstone of Berlin's work. Berlin's value pluralism challenged the notion that there is a single, universal truth or one clear path to happiness. Instead, he argued that human life is rich with competing values, each of which can be valid in its own context. There is no single moral system that can account for all of human experience, and no set of rules or ideals can be imposed universally without infringing upon personal freedom. This idea, radical at the time, argued that the variety of human experiences, cultural, social, and individual, should be embraced rather than eradicated. This concept of value pluralism was not simply an intellectual exercise for Berlin. It was deeply personal, shaped by his early experiences in Russia and later observations of political movements across Europe. He believed that tolerance, understanding, and intellectual flexibility were the only ways to navigate the complexities of modern life. The struggles he saw in the world were not simply about competing ideologies, they were about real human beings trying to balance their deeply held values in an increasingly complicated and interconnected world. Freedom and individuality, lessons from war and totalitarianism. Berlin's philosophical outlook on freedom was profoundly shaped by his life during the rise of fascism and communism. He had witnessed firsthand the brutal consequences of regimes that suppressed personal freedoms in the name of utopian ideals. For Berlin, the notion of freedom could never be separated from the practical realities of living under oppressive systems. His personal history of fleeing the Russian Revolution as a young man was an early sign of how political systems, when unchecked, could stifle individual freedoms. Berlin's major philosophical contribution on freedom came in his distinction between negative and positive liberty. Negative liberty, he argued, is the absence of interference, the freedom to live one's life without being coerced or oppressed by others. Positive liberty, in contrast, refers to the freedom to achieve one's highest potential, to realize one's goals, and to act in accordance with one's values. While both concepts of liberty are vital, Berlin saw dangers in conflating them. Totalitarian systems often promise to provide positive freedom, claiming they would lead people to self-realization and a better life. However, these regimes justified the most extreme forms of oppression in the name of a singular, utopian vision of human flourishing. Berlin was especially wary of any political ideology that claimed to know the true path to human freedom. He saw such ideologies, whether on the right or left, as inherently dangerous. For him, the defense of freedom meant defending the right of individuals to live according to their own values, even if these values conflicted with the values of others. Berlin's philosophical work on freedom called on us to resist the allure of political systems that promised ultimate liberation but ultimately destroyed individual autonomy. He argued that the true test of freedom is the ability to make choices for oneself, without the intervention of a coercive state or ideology. The dangers of absolute ideals. Berlin's life and work constantly reminded us of the dangers inherent in the pursuit of absolute ideals. His critique of monism, or the belief in a single, unifying vision of truth, was one of his most powerful philosophical points. To Berlin, any attempt to reduce the complexity of human life to a singular, absolute truth was an exercise in intellectual tyranny. Berlin saw the ideological movements of his time, whether fascist, communist, or even religious, striving for an absolute truth that could justify the suppression of diversity. Totalitarian ideologies, which claimed to have a monopoly on the truth, often led to the worst kinds of oppression. Berlin understood that such ideologies were dangerous because they suppressed the very freedoms that made human life meaningful, the ability to think critically, to disagree, and to live according to one's conscience. This lesson is especially resonant today, as we face the rise of political and religious ideologies that claim to hold the absolute truth. Berlin's insistence on the importance of intellectual humility, on recognizing the limits of our knowledge and accepting the complexity of human existence, is a vital antidote to the rigid, often dangerous, pursuit of a singular vision of truth. Embracing complexity and uncertainty. One of Berlin's most enduring lessons was his call to embrace the complexity and uncertainty of life. He believed that life's moral and political questions were never simple, and that true wisdom came from accepting the inherent contradictions in human experience. Berlin's writings reveal his deep skepticism toward grand, sweeping systems of thought that promised absolute answers. Rather than seeking to impose a single solution on complex social or political issues, Berlin urged us to accept the ambiguity of life. The complexity of human societies, with their diverse values and beliefs, cannot be understood through simplistic or rigid frameworks. The challenge, he argued, was to navigate this complexity without trying to eliminate it. In his own life, Berlin was a fox, not a hedgehog. Drawing from an ancient Greek fable, Berlin distinguished between the fox, who knows many things, and the hedgehog, who knows only one big thing. Berlin believed that intellectual flexibility, the ability to change one's views in light of new evidence or perspectives, was key to understanding the world. His approach to uncertainty and complexity challenges us in the present day to move away from polarized thinking, to embrace a plurality of perspectives, and to engage with the world in all its messiness, rather than trying to reduce it to simple solutions. Moral responsibility and the power of empathy. Berlin's commitment to freedom was always tempered by a profound sense of moral responsibility. In his view, the freedom to make choices was inseparable from the responsibility to recognize the consequences of those choices. He saw empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of others, as essential to living a moral life. In his later years, Berlin became increasingly concerned with the effects of political ideologies that denied the humanity of others. Totalitarian systems, he noted, not only oppressed people but also erased the moral value of personal responsibility. A system that demands unquestioning loyalty strips individuals of their moral agency, rendering them incapable of making responsible ethical decisions. Berlin's call for empathy, particularly in political and social contexts, was a plea for a deeper understanding of the suffering of others. He argued that moral responsibility is not merely about following rules or principles but about acknowledging the suffering of others and acting with compassion. In a world divided by ideologies and political movements, Berlin's emphasis on empathy reminds us that our shared humanity must come first. Avoiding the hedgehog mentality, the wisdom of intellectual flexibility. In his famous essay, The Hedgehog and the Fox, Berlin described two types of thinkers: the hedgehog, who believes in one overarching truth, and the fox, who embraces a diversity of perspectives. Berlin's own intellectual style was that of the fox, always open to new ideas, flexible in his thinking, and constantly questioning the world around him. Berlin was critical of those who sought to reduce the complexities of life to one simple, unifying idea. In his view, the hedgehog mentality, the insistence that there is one truth to be discovered and followed, was dangerous and limiting. Instead, Berlin encouraged us to be like the fox, to appreciate the richness and diversity of human life and to embrace the uncertainty and ambiguity that come with it. In a world that often demands certainty and clear answers, Berlin's message is a call for intellectual humility and flexibility. The world is too complex to be reduced to a single truth, and those who insist on doing so risk missing the richness of human experience. Conclusion: Isaiah Berlin's enduring legacy of respect, freedom, and humanity. Isaiah Berlin's intellectual legacy is not confined merely to the walls of academia but extends to the daily struggles and decisions that define our lives. His work challenges us to live thoughtfully in a complex world, where ideological certainty often blinds us to the subtleties of human existence. As the world becomes more interconnected yet simultaneously fractured by political, cultural, and ideological divides, Berlin's philosophy remains a beacon of guidance. His commitment to pluralism, tolerance, intellectual flexibility, and moral responsibility speaks to the heart of what it means to live as a free and humane individual in a society that is anything but simple. Berlin's vision of freedom was never just about individual liberty in a legal sense but about the deeper freedom that comes from being able to live one's life authentically, without being crushed under the weight of external forces or oppressive systems. As a child of exile, Berlin understood the fragility of freedom in ways many could not. His life was a testament to the complexities of human agency, the moral weight of making choices, and the responsibility that comes with those choices. He believed that to be truly free, one had to understand the intricate balance between personal autonomy and the wider societal frameworks in which we live. His advocacy for value pluralism was not a mere academic distinction but an imperative that called for a new way of seeing the world, one that embraced contradiction, diversity, and the very messiness of human experience. Berlin's insistence on the multiplicity of human values wasn't just an intellectual stance, it was a clarion call for empathy, tolerance, and understanding in an increasingly polarized world. He taught us that the very richness of our shared humanity lies in our differences and that embracing these differences, rather than forcing uniformity, was the key to living well, both individually and collectively. In a world that often demands ideological purity, Berlin's message is a profound antidote. His philosophical critique of absolute ideals reminds us of the dangers inherent in movements that seek to impose a singular vision of truth. Totalitarian ideologies, whether from the left or the right, promise a single answer to complex questions, and it is this promise of certainty that can lead to the most horrifying injustices. Berlin's philosophy urges us to resist the allure of certainty, to reject the totalitarian impulse that seeks to reduce the complexity of human existence to a singular set of rules, and instead to embrace the ambiguity and uncertainty that are inevitable in life. At the core of Berlin's work is a deep respect for human individuality. His emphasis on the importance of personal freedom goes hand in hand with his recognition of the dangers of ideological conformity. The oppressive systems he witnessed throughout his life, whether in Nazi Germany, Stalinist Russia, or other totalitarian regimes, were all driven by the belief that one group's vision of truth was the only one that mattered. These ideologies led to the silencing of dissent, the persecution of the individual, and the erosion of personal agency. Berlin's defense of individual freedom was, therefore, not simply a political stance but a moral one. The dignity of the individual, for Berlin, was paramount, and it was only through respecting this dignity that societies could flourish. Berlin also taught us that the struggle for freedom and justice is never simple. The world is filled with competing values and conflicting visions of the good life. As individuals, we must navigate these conflicts with humility and an understanding that there is no one-size-fits-all solution to the problems we face. To be human is to confront moral and political complexity, to grapple with the tension between competing values, between individual desires and the demands of society, between the aspirations of different cultures and traditions. Berlin's commitment to intellectual flexibility is a reminder that no one has a monopoly on truth. Our task, as he saw it, was not to seek to impose our truth on others, but to create spaces where different truths could coexist in mutual respect. Furthermore, Berlin's emphasis on empathy, his belief that understanding others' perspectives is a moral duty, has never been more pertinent. In an age where social media and polarized media outlets have deepened our divisions, Berlin's call for empathy offers a much-needed counterbalance. In his view, true political and moral engagement comes not from merely defending one's own beliefs but from listening to, and attempting to understand, those whose beliefs differ. Empathy, for Berlin, was not just about feeling sympathy for others, it was about taking seriously their lived experiences, recognizing their humanity, and engaging with them in a way that respects their right to hold different values. In today's world, where cultural, religious, and political divisions seem ever more pronounced, Berlin's lessons provide a framework for engaging with the world's complexities in a constructive way. He invites us to approach life with curiosity, humility, and a deep sense of respect for the variety of human experiences. Rather than seeing the world through a lens of ideological purity or moral certainty, Berlin urges us to see the world as it is, a tapestry of contradictions, diversities, and ambiguities. The ability to navigate this complexity without becoming overwhelmed or resorting to simplistic answers, he argued, is the essence of wisdom. As we grapple with contemporary issues such as climate change, social justice, and political polarization, Berlin's advocacy for pluralism offers a model for how we might address these global crises. His philosophy encourages us to think beyond national or ideological borders, to understand that people around the world are motivated by different values, and that a true solution must respect the diversity of these values. Berlin's vision of a pluralistic world, where individuals are free to pursue their own lives and societies respect their diversity, is a compelling blueprint for the future. In conclusion, Isaiah Berlin's life and philosophy provide a rich, timeless resource for those who seek to live with greater intellectual humility, moral responsibility, and empathy. His belief in the importance of individual freedom, respect for diversity, and the need for intellectual flexibility offers a pathway through the complexities and challenges of modern life. In a world that often seems divided by ideology and culture, Berlin's call for tolerance, curiosity, and open-mindedness is more urgent than ever. As we continue to navigate a world filled with uncertainties and conflicts, we can look to Berlin's legacy as a reminder that the journey toward a better, more just world is not about finding simple answers or imposing one truth on all. Instead, it is about creating a space where freedom, respect, and human dignity can thrive, and where the multiplicity of human values is not only tolerated but celebrated. In this sense, Isaiah Berlin's philosophy is not just a series of intellectual lessons, it is a call to action, a call to engage with the world in a way that honors our shared humanity and builds a future that respects the diversity of the human spirit.